that flight was doomed.
It's unclear who fired the missile, but MH17 did fly over a war zone, the region below embroiled in conflict between Russian separatists and the Ukrainian government.
It sure is hard to understand why you would route an aircraft over a known combat zone.
But the plane's altitude was determined to be safe for commercial air traffic, even though NATO's top commander, American General Philip Breedlove, said recently that Russia has been providing air defense training to the pro-Russian rebels.
Why this Malaysian flight did not file to either go left or right and not over the combat zone is still a mystery tonight.
On the ground, photographer and ABC News freelance producer John Wendell was one of the first journalists to arrive at the horrific crash scene.
You're at the crash site, John. Tell us what you see.
It's a pretty remote country road, and there are rebel fighters here who have secured the area. There's a smoldering pile of wreckage with a kind of a fire coming out of the top of it. I'm trying to head there right now.
Since February, pro-Russian separatists have been waging war against the Ukrainian government.
They're fighting for Russia and for Russia's cause and trying to create in the eastern area of Ukraine a separate nation that would then join up with Russia the way Crimea broke away from Ukraine and joined up with Russia.
A battle fought not only on the ground, but in the skies. Just this week, it's believed Russian separatists shot down 2 Ukrainian military planes. But MH17 was a commercial flight filled with civilians, not a military target. Almost immediately, Ukrainian President Poroshenko unequivocally placed the blame on Russia, which is accused of arming the separatists, saying it wasn't an accident or a disaster, but an act of terrorism. And Ukraine released what they say is an intercepted phone call proving it. In the recordings, men they describe as militants talk about shooting down a plane, later saying it was a civilian plane.
I cannot imagine anybody on either side of this conflict wanting to take down a Malaysian aircraft. It was not an accident that they were trying to shoot down an aircraft, but they got the wrong aircraft.
Authorities believe a powerful missile launcher like this was used to shoot down the plane.
So this was not just some small system. This was a very sophisticated surface-to-air missile system.
A system that requires extensive training, and those who fired it may not have had enough.
The United States will offer any assistance we can to help determine what happened and why. And as a country, our thoughts and prayers are with all the families of the passengers, wherever they call home.
And for the people of Malaysia, it's another devastating loss in less than 5 months after Malaysia Air 370 disappeared over the Indian Ocean.
It's a terrible coincidence for the people of Malaysia and for Malaysian Airlines that the aircraft that was shot down today was a Malaysian Air 777. The same type and model as disappeared earlier in the year for reasons that we still don't know about.
Along with the anguish, some staggering close calls.
You get this sick feeling in the pit of your stomach.
We were supposed to be in that flight, and it's obviously, you know, something watching over us and saying, no, don't get on that flight.
But around the world tonight, thousands mourn and pay tribute to the 298 souls lost.
Well, back home, Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has been meeting with the Russian ambassador to discuss the plane tragedy. For the latest, let's cross to Charles Croucher in Canberra. Charles, that meeting has just wrapped up. What happened?
George, it has. What we're being told is that meeting was more about gaining safe passage for DFAT officials to the crash site and launching the international investigation than about any kind of accusations towards Russia. Of course, there's lots for those DFAT officials to do, including the repatriation of the 27 Australians. But, Georgie, we'll hear from Julie Bishop shortly. But an interesting development in the last 40 minutes. After driving into an underground car park, we're told the Russian ambassador will leave via the foyer of the Commonwealth offices in Sydney in full access of the public and full access of the cameras. And this is very much about establishing an appearance of cooperation and transparency on Russia's behalf. But here's what our Foreign Minister Julie Bishop had to say a short time ago at the conclusion of that meeting.
Spoken to a number of foreign ministers, and I have a number of phone calls lined up. I have asked to speak to the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and I hope to do that this evening.
That total 28, Foreign Minister, do you fear that may rise even further?
I'm sorry,
28 death toll. Do you fear that may rise even higher?
We are still checking passports against the manifest. The number could be higher, but at this stage it's confirmed at 28. It was 27 this morning, it's been confirmed at 28. I've also spoken to the New Zealand Foreign Minister. I am aware that there's a New Zealand national who was an Australian resident, and so we're working through country by country to determine the nationality of all those on board.
Can you give specifics on the 20?
So the Australian death toll now, Charles, standing at 28. What has been the reaction to this tragedy from the Prime Minister today?
Georgie, in the last hour or so, Tony Abbott's announced that tomorrow flags will be flown at half-mast here at Parliament and on all Australian government buildings and embassies around the world. There will also be a national commemorative service and a national day of mourning that will be held later this year for the victims of the tragedy, as you mentioned, that's now reached 28 for Australians. Earlier today, Tony Abbott and Bill Shorten addressed the House of Representatives, the opposition leader offering the Prime Minister Labor's support for any action that needs to take place. The Prime Minister was sombre, and the mood here has been such a contrast to the partisan battles of the week that we've had. Here's what Tony Abbott had to say in the House.
Madam Speaker, we owe it to the dead and their families. We owe it to the peace and stability of the wider world to establish the facts, and we will do all we humanly can to bring that about. The bullying of small countries by big ones, the trampling of justice and decency in the pursuit of national aggrandisement, and reckless indifference to human life should have no place in our world.
Yeah. Charles, you've spoken to Ukraine's top-ranking official in Australia. Tell us what he's had to say today.
Georgie, he, like all Ukrainians, indeed people around the world, are quite shocked at what's happened today. He was very clear, though. He said that a full investigation should take place, and until then, there should be no finger-pointing and no conclusions reached. However, there was a big caveat that he said these missiles have either come from the Ukraine or from Russia, and he insisted they did not come from the Ukraine, which leaves the finger-pointing in one direction. He also said if that was the case, if these studies found that Russia had some involvement, that the international response should be strong. I questioned him directly about this. Here's what he had to say.